Have you ever looked at the headlines and wondered how someone's fortune can absolutely explode by billions of dollars, but their income tax bill stays, well, tiny? Today, we're going to open up the playbook that shows exactly how some of the wealthiest people out there legally pay so little. Okay, let's get into it.
So let's start with just a number, 4.8%. What do you think that is? In the wild world of the ultra-wealthy, this little number tells a huge, fascinating story.
Yep, that 4.8%. That was the average true tax rate that 26 of America's richest billionaires paid on the growth of their wealth over a 6-year span. Now, this is a key detail. We're not talking about the tax on their reported income. We're talking about a tax rate on the actual growth of their massive fortunes.
So that leads us to the big question, right? How is that even possible? And let's be clear, this isn't about some kind of illegal tax evasion. Nope. This is all about a very specific, incredibly powerful, and perfectly legal set of strategies for managing wealth.
The main strategy is so well known in financial circles, it's got this kind of morbidly catchy name: buy, borrow, die. Law professor Edward McCaffrey was one of the first to really lay it all out. And this 3-step plan, it's really the foundation for how you can grow a massive fortune while generating almost no taxable income.
Let's break it down, because it's actually as simple as it sounds. First, you buy assets you expect to go up in value. Then you borrow money against those assets to live on. And finally, that die step, that's where a really important piece of the tax code comes into play and just wraps the whole thing up with a bow.
Okay, so phase 1, buy. This is all about snapping up things that will appreciate over time. You know, stocks, real estate, maybe a Picasso or two. The number one goal here is to let your wealth grow on paper without ever actually selling a thing. Why? Because if you don't sell, you don't have what's called a capital gain. And if there's no gain, there's no tax event. Simple as that.
Now for borrow. So you might be thinking, how do you spend your money if you never sell your assets? Well, you borrow against them. You go to a bank, use your giant stock portfolio as collateral, and take out low-interest loans. And here is the absolute key. The money you get from a loan is not considered income, it's debt. So you get millions in tax-free cash to live on, all while your original assets just keep on growing.
But hold on, what about those loans? Don't you have to pay them back? Well, this leads us to the final and honestly the most powerful part of the entire strategy, the die step. This whole thing works because of a specific provision in the tax code that's often called the stepped-up basis loophole.
All right, the official term is stepped-up basis. And what it means is this. When someone inherits an asset, like a stock or a house, the original price paid for it, what's called the cost basis, gets reset. It gets stepped up to whatever the market value is on the day the original owner dies. And that one little adjustment, it has enormous consequences.
Let's just look at how powerful this is. In scenario A, you buy a stock for $1 million and sell it for $10 million before you die. Boom, you have a $9 million taxable capital gain. But now, look at scenario B. You hold that same stock until you die. Your kid inherits it, and its cost basis is stepped up to the current $10 million value. If they turn around and sell it for that price, their taxable gain is zero, a big fat nothing. That entire $9 million gain is never ever taxed.
I mean, as Americans for Tax Fairness puts it, if someone dies without selling, those gains just disappear for tax purposes. It's like they never happened. And those loans taken out during the borrow phase, they can be paid off by selling just a tiny piece of these newly stepped-up, tax-free assets. It's a perfect circle.
So buy, borrow, die is the master strategy for untaxed wealth growth. But it's not the only play in the book. What about actual income? Well, for a lot of folks in private equity and hedge funds, there's another big one called carried interest.
It's famously known as the carried interest loophole. And here's the deal. For fund managers, a huge slice of their pay isn't a salary. It's a share of the investment profits, and that's called carried interest. Now, instead of being taxed as regular income like your paycheck, which could be up to 37%, it gets treated like a long-term capital gain, which is taxed at a much lower rate, around 20%. For some of the highest earners in finance, that is a huge tax advantage. So when you put it all together, you combine strategies like buy, borrow, die with other loopholes, what's the real result? Let's circle all the way back to where we started and look at the actual impact for some very well-known names.
This is really something. From 2013 to 2018, Warren Buffett's wealth grew by more than $24 billion. His true tax rate on that growth, 0.1%. Not a typo. Jeff Bezos' wealth grew by over $100 billion, and his true tax rate was just 1.1%.
This shows you exactly how these principles work in the real world. So the main takeaway, the fundamental reason this all works is actually pretty simple. The U.S. tax system is built to tax income, things like salaries, wages, and profits when you sell something. It is not really designed to tax the passive growth of wealth. So by minimizing your realized income, you can legally minimize your tax bill, even while your net worth is blasting off into the stratosphere.
And this really gets to the heart of a huge ongoing debate. It leaves us with this fundamental policy question. Should the system keep focusing almost entirely on what people earn in a given year? Or should it shift and start focusing more on what people own? That right there, that is the multi-trillion-dollar question at the center of this entire playbook.